Good morning, 171 guys. How we doing? This is Mr. Alexander coming at you. We've got we're into week 14, which is the last week of the semester. If you guys remember, they extended our spring break by a week, which basically pushed our classes back 1 week. So this should be finals week, but unfortunately, we still have one more week of lectures that we have to get through. Instead of extending finals week out to the 15th week, they actually would like us to finish our finals on time and get our finals done this week so they can have grades in and graduation stuff taken care of. So this is going to be kind of a busy week for most of you guys. You're probably doing last classes and finals for most of your instructors. What I'm going to do, I've written my final. My final's published. I'm going to send each of you a link to an online website. I think it's called ZipGrade, where you're going to be able to open up the document that contains the final, and you'll have on the left-hand side of your screen an answer key, basically a multiple choice answer key that you'll fill out. I'll send you guys that. It's just a link. You put your name in. You're going to need to put some sort of 4-digit student identification number. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is to actually put in the last 4 numbers of your student ID. So your Morrisville ID, whatever the last 4 numbers in, put that in as an ID. There's 70 questions, multiple choice. And the multiple choice is true or false. So A would be true, B would be false. Basically, you're going to read the statement. If you agree with the statement as being a true statement, you'd put an A down. If you read the statement and you don't agree with it, it's going to be a B. Okay, so there's going to be 70 of those types of questions. At the end of this test, there are going to be 2 other types of questions which you cannot answer with the answer key. What you're going to do is you're going to write down those questions, answer those, and send those to me in an email. So the answers to those will be sent to me in an email this week. So I would ask that you get that done by the, as soon as you can. We're supposed to have them done by Friday, but if you can get them done by Friday, you might as well get it done. So you should have plenty of time to do it. There is a timer on the test, but I maxed out the timer. It gives you 4 hours to do it. The only catch there is if you have an internet crash or you disconnect or you close it out for some reason, you can't go back into the test. So you got one shot at this. Hopefully you set yourself enough time to do 70 questions, multiple choice, and you got a strong enough internet deal where you don't get kicked out. So if you do get kicked out, shoot me an email right away. I'll see what I can do on my end about resetting it, but it shouldn't be a big deal to get 70 questions done in 4 hours. So I think you got 4 hours. Yeah, 4 hours. I said it too. So, but that's what we're gonna do. What I wanted to cover today is chapter 13. We did differential service. We did a little stuff in my shop the other day. Talked about the Ford 9-inch. Drive axle and differential diagnosis and service. I'm not sure if I signed this chapter, but it's chapter 13 in the new book. Again, this is drive axle and differential diagnosis and service. So go ahead and do that chapter. The questions at the end, you can go ahead and do the questions at the end. You don't have to worry about, we're not going to have a journal due to me Sunday this week. So whatever you do from now on, you're kind of doing on your own. So make sure you get it done. So, all right, differential itself. One of the things I want to talk about, remember we talked about this being an open differential. This is an open differential, which basically means if you go around a turn, one wheel is allowed to travel further than the other wheel. And that's what an open differential will do for you. And that's why they have differentials. They used to have solid axles. And the problem with those is when you turn and went around a corner, one of the tires would actually break loose, and it was very dangerous. So this is a better way of creating. But on some situations, whether you're stuck in the mud, stuck on the ice, or if you're in a performance institute or in a situation where you want to drag race or something, you don't want this to occur. Because if that occurs, that means you have a loose wheel spinning, and the wheel that has traction is not spinning. There's no power being transferred to that wheel. So in those cases, over the years, the automotive manufacturers have built differentials that they would consider to be a limited slip differential, sometimes referred to as POSI, traction differential, but I think a limited slip is more of a generalized term for it. But there's a bunch of locking differential of some sort. Some manufacturers will put some sort of clutch arrangement in here, some sort of device that engages at certain percentages of slip. That's referred to as what they call a progressive coupler. Now, what a progressive coupler does is allows for a certain amount of slip, but if you go beyond that certain amount of slip, it will engage and try to turn both axles at the same speed. So, basic operation. There's your cross pins. Your cross pin's sitting right here going across your differential. You've got these small side gears. The cross shaft is going to rotate around and try to drive these side gears. Because of the cut, this angle right here, it's like a 45-degree angle cut between this gear and this gear. When you accelerate, this gear and this gear are naturally trying to become disconnected. The force is being exerted at the side of the gear to the point where they push away from each other. That natural tendency to push away from each other can be utilized in a clutch arrangement. So what they'll do is they'll simply put a series of plates, steels, and clutches between this gear and this case surface. You gotta remember, this is not attached. This is not attached to the case. But if I was to put a clutch pack under here, and maybe put a spring across here to keep it at zero clearance, when I accelerate, this gear is going to push this gear in this direction. This direction, it's actually going to be pushing straight up this way. The pressure that's exerted from the side of this gear to the side of this cover will compress those clutches and engage them. Once that occurs, this gear will now be held tight to this gear. Now, this is what's interesting. We could put clutches on both sides, but you really only need one side. When this comes up and applies, we now tie this gear to this case. If that occurs, this is going to turn as an assembly. So as long as this drive axle is tied through the clutch back to this case and this turns as an assembly, the other side cannot rotate on its own. If it cannot rotate on its own, it's going to turn as a complete assembly. You've now locked both gears to the case, and you're going to operate both wheels on the outside of that vehicle at the same time. Because it's a progressive coupler, it will allow natural turning in parking lots. It will not cause a problem. It's only when you get in a severe differential between one wheel and the other where that clutch will actually apply a grip and then turn both wheels. Okay, that's a posi traction axle. It's been around for a while. It's a good system. If it's a clutch disc, like disc and plate, it can be serviced. You can take it apart, put new clutches in if you want to. You can get your Jegs catalog out and buy some highfalutin, fancy racing style clutch packs if you want. But that's basically how it works. Now, there are some manufacturers that will actually use a cone clutch, which is a steel tapered cone. If it's a cone clutch, that's something that's not serviceable. So if it fails, you're going to have to buy the whole darn thing. Okay. There are other manufacturers that have played around with pneumatic lockers where you hit a button, a pin comes out and engages, or electric lockers, an e-lock system that's out there. Those all do the same thing. All they're doing is taking one of these gears and they're locking it to the case. If you've ever seen an off-road Jeep guy, hits a button, there's an air cylinder in here that actually pushes out on a pin that locks that gear to the case. That's an air locking system. That's not a progressive coupler. Now, the problem with that is, you're either in four-wheel drive or you're not in four-wheel. You're either locking both of them together or you're not locking them. And those guys are off-road and they hit the button. They're driving over rocks. They really don't care about parking lot maneuvers. But the problem with them, if they lock that in the wintertime and they're in a parking lot, they can't turn their Jeep into a spot. So, but that's the difference. So it's either progressive coupler, which allows for a slip, or it's some sort of mechanical link. So, but those are the differences between some of the air lockers. There's a couple of geared variations in there, and they explain that pretty good in the book. And that's but that gives you a good solid understanding of what a limited slip axle will do. Now, next section we're going to get into, and we're going to load a video up after this one, is going to be on transfer cases. And there's a lot of similarities between what I just talked about in a transfer case as to that in an axle. So, okay, so let me load this one up, and then we'll get back to you in a second.